Yo, let's go. What's up, y'all? It's called we do a little day streaming. We do a little Thanksgiving road trip streaming. Good to see y'all. Hope everybody's doing all right. Today we're covering JG Ballard, Cocaine Nights. This is a little bit different, y'all. This one's going to be a little bit different. JG Ballard, and we're going to dive a little bit into Bret Easton Ellis's The Informers. And both of these are sort of sun-soaked, sun-bleached 1990s novels. But it's interesting because neither one of them is really a novel. They sort of differ in terms of their form. And so we're going to dive into what that means in our analysis of these two texts. But really what I wanted to do is cover two mid-1990s. Let's see. Ballard is 1996, and The Informers is 1994. And I actually really struggled with the Bret Easton Ellis, The Informers. This will be our third Bret Easton Ellis book. Of course, we've done Lunar Park, and we did American Psycho. We've done a lot of postmodern work. This is, again, slightly different. This is our first JG Ballard book. Of course, you know Ballard from Empire of the Sun, High Rise, etc. But I decided to do this one just because I was looking for something a little lighter, especially after reading The Informers. And The Informers by Bret Easton Ellis is really a series of vignettes. It's kind of a book of short stories united by a through line of sort of sun-soaked 80s and 90s typical Bret Easton Ellis depravity. And so really I'm just going to go into one of the short stories in this book that occurs near the end. It's about Jamie the vampire in L.A., modern vampires. So we're going to dive into that. But really what I'm going to spend most of my time on is Cocaine Nights by JG Ballard. And this is an interesting book because it's really a romanatese, right? It's really a kind of a dystopian fable. It takes the form of really an Agatha Christie whodunit, but you guess, you can kind of guess. I mean, you can guess sort of. I don't know if you'll be able to guess right away who done it, but we're going to get into that. And of course, we're not doing a book review, so we're doing an analysis of the book. So I'm going to talk about who done it, and it's pretty interesting. You may be able to figure it out right away and where it goes off. Of course, it's a different kind of dystopian book because it's not this typical, it's not a post-apocalyptic dystopia. It's really more of a dystopia of I don't know, the Costa del Sol, and the kind of elite, eyes wide shut, fight club activities that occur with the ultimate boredom and people looking for sensation. I would say that my thesis for both of these books is that this is a glimpse into the world, or it's really a worldview of what happens with privileged people who have no values, and they are empty, again, in the postmodern landscape, empty, and are looking for absolute freedom, and they end up going into the dark places that we always see. We see this occur over and over. And there are many parallels, especially with this book, with this Ballard book, between Eyes Wide Shut in terms of their extracurricular activities, if you know what I mean, that overtake their existence, their very lives. I mean, it becomes curricular in a way. And so anyway, I hope everybody's having a happy Thanksgiving out there. To you non-Yanks, to you non-Americans, happy Thanksgiving to you too. Appreciate you all. And just to let you know, I figured I would do this today, do a little day streaming because, so many times, I don't know if y'all felt this way, but like you're driving on the long road trip, maybe you're going to see your family or something, and you're like, what? Where is everybody? Why is nobody streaming? I need something to listen to. So maybe you're on the road and maybe you're listening to this. And if you are, that's cool. Thank you. I will say that this is not one, none of these are are streams for the whole family, but especially especially not this one. I'm going to try to keep it, as algo safe as I can. But even the title of the book, I mean, is kind of, going off a little bit. But there are some pretty hardcore, gruesome details especially in the Ellis book. But I'm going to keep it, as algo safe as I can and safe for the fam. Even though I don't think you should be, I don't know about listening to this in the car on the way to Pawpaw's house. But maybe you're alone. Maybe you're with your fine girlfriend. You just want to. You want to listen to some nonsense. I don't know, whatever. But, yeah, happy Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving Eve. And I will also say that too bad, Massachusetts Harvard Yarders. The first Thanksgiving is not up there. It's 15 minutes from here. Yeah, that's right, everybody. The first Thanksgiving was here, down here in VA. So if you want to have Thanksgiving, come to VA. Because the first one and the second one are both pretty close to me. Especially the second one. It's about 1619. That's before any of that Plymouth Rock business happened. Remember when they went to Plymouth Rock, they were headed for VA, but they got blown off course, right? Then we didn't have to deal with the Massachusetts pilgrims or whatever. Right, they got blown up to Massachusetts. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us. So yeah, it was not far from here in VA. And they weren't giving thanks for the cornucopia and exchanging headdresses or whatever. They were giving thanks to Almighty God for making it here. That's what Thanksgiving is. So, with that being said. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Hope you will celebrate this nice vacation week with me by going over some literature. Shouts out to all my homeboys out there, all my homies in the chat, everybody who's watching. Let's dive into this book, Cocaine Nights, by JG Ballard. I like the title because the title is almost it gives a sense of a sort of throwaway. What used to be a kind of a throwaway airport or train station novel back in the day, young people, before the computer phones, you'd be waiting for your flight or for your train or whatever, and you'd go into the little bookstore in there and you buy a little paperback novel, a little Wilbur Smith or whatever, and you could read it on your little trip. And that was it. It's just a fun adventure novel. And this kind of has the veneer of that. But, of course, it is, it goes a lot deeper than that. And so what happens in the book, just a kind of an overview of the narrative and the plot of this book, Cocaine Nights by JG Ballard. What happens is there's this guy, Charles Prentice. Get it? Prentice, like apprentice. Not like, the apprentice, China. He's the apprentice, like... We think that he's going to be some sort of sorcerer's apprentice or an apprentice to some sort of, let's say, club or society. But he flies, he's a travel writer, and he flies down to Gibraltar, and he's going to see his brother Frank. Charles, Frank, this is kind of a Carolingian. I don't know, what's the symbolism here? Well, we'll find out. So he goes down to see his brother Frank, who's on the Costa del Sol, right, with the other Brits, the other expatriates. And he finds out that Frank is in prison down there. He's in a Spanish prison. And Frank has been accused of killing 5 people in an arson attack. He set fire to a mansion at a resort, a mansion overlooking a resort on the sunny Golden Coast down there in Spain. And to his surprise, when he goes to visit Frank, what he finds out is that Frank not only is, Frank not only says, that he did it, but he pleaded guilty, and he's happy to plead guilty. So he's like, "What's this? What's the deal?" So Charles, the travel writer, goes on a kind of gumshoe quest to find out what is the real story and who really set the fire. And so he goes to this resort, and he meets a kind of a wide variety of characters, a big cast of characters, a kind of Knives Out Agatha Christie, Poirot cast of characters, all with different lives and motivations. And he finds that they all are sort of like, they're all not necessarily mysterious, but they all are, everybody, they all have something to hide. And then eventually what happens is he is sitting in a car. Well, first of all, he finds out that the fire was set at it wasn't just like a random fire. It was set at a party. There was a massive party. And that the people who were killed inside, there were 5 people killed inside, including the 2 owners, their au pair, their fake and gray assistant, and let's see, one other person. But that nobody tried to escape the fire. Like, the people at the party sat there and watched the house burn, and then they tried to like open some windows or whatever, but nobody inside ever tried to escape, which is weird. Das ist weird, yeah. So then he's like Charles is sitting in this car in the car park, and he sees this roip taking place in a car across the car park, and he goes over and he rescues the woman, and the roiper runs away. And then to his surprise, the woman like just kind of gathers herself up and then goes to a party and then starts dancing like nothing ever happened. It's very, very strange. Very strange here. So automatically we sense that, these people at this resort, they're like at the good time resort or whatever, and they are involved in some strange and decadent games. Yes. Because why are they acting this way? The more he pursues what happened to Frank, the more he starts to, go down the proverbial rabbit hole. And at one point, he is in somebody's apartment. Then he is attacked. He is strangled by an assassin with, gloved hands and like a weird odor on his hands. But he's not killed. And he's like, why was this a warning? That's really weird. But he gets knocked out. When he wakes up, he starts going through the burned house, and he finds a VCR with a tape in it. Uh-oh. Listen, man. Okay. All right, look. If you're dealing with anything having to do with the elites, right? If you're in the aftermath of a party, if the house has been burned and there's a tape, just be wary of what's going to be on the tape, right? We all know what's going to be on the tape, right? So he takes the tape. The tape didn't get burned, which means that the tape was placed there after the fire. It's not melted, right? There was this thing, young people, called VCRs, and you had to rewind the tape afterwards anyway. And so he goes and he watches the tape, and what he sees on the tape is some total weird, eyes wide shut, creeper activity going on with the lady of the house, and there's a guy who comes in, some crazy things happen, and they're playing their weird, depraved games. Filthy activities, as Norm MacDonald would say. Right, it's just filthy. And then 2 guys, they're near Gibraltar, right? So these 2 Arab guys from North Africa burst into the frame, and then a violent roip takes place, okay? And then we see like sort of, he tries to decipher like, okay, where's this taking place? What's in the window shot? He sees a spire. He sees what's in the background. He sees a reflection of somebody holding the camera. So somebody's filming it. That's another person that's involved in the crime. And he sees that it's a woman holding the camera and that she has a scar. Later on, he gets seduced by this woman. I think it's the psychiatrist. Of course, the psychiatrist, we figure out, is the one who was taping it. We see her scar. There's a lot of, sunny Spanish sexual activity that goes on. Lots of drugs in this. We find out that the whole, it's in the title of the book, but it's kind of interesting because it's sort of misleading. There's way more drugs than just the title lets on. I mean, the whole resort is filled with, like, there's a nightclub and there's dealers, and then we find out that one of the girls that died in the fire died sitting on the toilet, slamming something. She was shooting up. And so everybody in this resort is like either a heroin addict or on cocaine or on amphetamines or on all of the above. Right. And he's like, okay, this is weird. Then he gets chased by, he's like kind of trying to maneuver through the grounds of the resort. And then he gets chased by a guy on a hang glider. Very, very JG Ballard moment. And we find out what that means later. But then he meets this guy named Bobby Crawford. Bobby Crawford is the tennis pro at the resort. Bobby Crawford is an Englishman who has kind of floats up and down the coast. And he's like the entertainment manager going from resort to resort. And we find out that Bobby Crawford is more of a Svengali sort of shaman. This guy, he's like the best looking, the most popular. He's magnetic. He's got charisma, but he's also into some real dark stuff. And what we find out is that what's been happening at this place is he goes from resort to resort and he starts getting involved in like these petty crimes. For instance, he'll break into a car, and he found a long time ago that when he broke into a car, somehow the people at the resort found a sense of excitement because there was something from the outside. This is the idea of the other, the outside, right? And they don't know who did it, but they're sort of united in their bond of having to protect themselves from crime. The crimes start getting worse. Their houses start getting broken into. Now they have to, buy weapons. They have to have security systems, and it gives them something to talk about. Do you see where this is going? So what we find out eventually is that Bobby Crawford has this kind of fight club, not an actual fight club, but it's the same sort of activity where the people at the resort, the residents, are kind of initiated into this thing, and they realize they can have some excitement besides the surface veneer of it's pretty. I mean, it's pretty. The superficial aspect of the resort, it's a pretty nice resort. I mean, there's tennis, there are yachts, there's swimming. There's games, there's dancing, they have theater, and they go to see Tom Stoppard and Harold Pinter plays. And it's sort of the typical, English resort, but for the ultra-rich. But they are jaded, and they find no purpose in life because they're empty. So what they start doing is getting involved in the crimes themselves. They follow Bobby Crawford, and he basically gives them assignments for what to do. So you'll give Jim over here is looking for something to do. So you'll say, okay, you and Eduardo are going to go break into so-and-so's house, and you're going to steal all the 90s, VCRs and TVs. So that's what they do, and they can't get caught. And then to blow off steam after that, then they start going to clubs at night, and they start dancing. And then everybody in the resort starts going to the clubs. And then the clubs start attracting drug dealers, and then the drug dealers start attracting like enforcers because they got to pay up because people aren't paying their dues for all of their smack or whatever, all their yayo and smack and speed. And then that starts causing violence, and then the people start. In other words, what it's doing here is it bonds them, it bonds the residents in this activity of like secret and sealed, nefarious underworld activity where they feel like they have something to do and they have a secret from everybody else, and yet they're all involved in it. So then what happens is they decide that they watch a yacht get burned, and the yacht. They also see a speedboat like running from the Spanish police, and that's a hashish and heroin runner from Morocco, delivering the goods straight to their resort. And then at one point they see that boat blow up. The boat gets sabotaged. They also see their yachts blow up. And then they remember that they have yachts themselves. So then they start taking care of their yachts. These people are so, they're so wealthy. They don't even know that they have yachts parked at their own yacht club, at the yacht club. And then they decide they need an ultimate activity of, something to bond them all together in this with this common bond. They're binded. And so Crawford tells them basically, like, gives them all assignments, and they all, what we find out, if you didn't figure this out already, is that the people who killed the 5 people in the mansion before the book started, who done it? Well, it was all of them. They all did it. They all had a part to play. And one of the people that had a part was Frank, who ran the activities, one of the activities divisions at the resort. That's Charles's brother. Well, Frank's job was to basically dig up these Molotov cocktails. You know, there were wine bottles filled with gasoline, kerosene, and ether. And he dug them up, brought them into the party. So nobody really saw who it was that started the fire because everybody had a part to play. He brought them in. Somebody else poured the petrol in the air conditioning system. Another person put it in the ventilators. Another person put it like in the fridge. Somebody poured it in. I mean, it was just like everybody has this small role to play in the eventual conflagration. And so when the fire starts and it burns, not only are all of the people, not only do they not do anything because they were all involved in it, but even the people in the house don't try to put out the fire because they also are involved. And it takes on this Wicker Man aspect of a great burning ritual. And now they're all binded together in their communal guilt. They've all committed a series of murders together, so they are all binded to each other, and they can't reveal who did it, and they don't even want to reveal who did it. And in fact, when the police get there and they find Frank, the reason that he confessed was because he was caught with the empty bottles, some empty Molotov cocktail bottles. He poured out. He didn't throw them. He poured them out, and he's willing to take the blame because he sees himself as a sacrifice for the group. Get it? Now, that's not even the whole point of the book. One of the other things that happens is Charles, who is intent on finding out what happened with his brother, like gets sucked into their world, and he gets drawn into the magnetic circle of this guy, Crawford. Crawford takes him to a new place. It's called Residencia del Sol. This is going to be a new, it's a new dystopian, like even more futuristic sort of resort where everything that the people who are going to live there, everything that they want is cared for like there. It's a completely insular society. At one point, he discusses how Crawford says, like, look, the resort looks out onto the ocean. We're like 20 feet from the ocean, but no one ever goes and looks at the ocean, and no one ever goes swimming because everything points inward. There are pools, and, you know, it's like Brave New World, but inside this big compound. And so Charles is like, well, where are all the people? There's no people yet. And can I go swimming? And Crawford's like, well, you can't go swimming because all the pools are like zen. You know, it's very zen. And if you break the surface of the pool, then it's bad luck, which is a metaphor for the entire thing, right? Because you can't break the surface of their secrets because it would be bad luck for their ritualistic activities and their kind of eyes wide shut society, right? Now, the interesting thing, what Ballard does here is, the reason this is a kind of a dystopian anti-fable is because Crawford eventually asks Charles to take over some duties. He says he'll pay him, this exorbitant amount just to look over the place because Crawford has to go on to the next place. So Charles finds himself like doing the very job that Frank was doing at the last resort. People eventually come, and Charles starts getting involved in the activities that he had so much of a moral problem with at the beginning of the book. But because it's like death by a thousand cuts, he inches his way into their society, and now he starts running it. And then finally, at the end of the novel, he's presented by Cabrera, the Spanish policeman, says, look, your brother's on trial tomorrow. He's going to be tried. Do you want to come and talk to him? And Charles is like, no, I got too much going on. I can't leave the resort. So now he doesn't even care about his brother that he went there to find. And then what happens is he goes out to the tennis court and he sees that Crawford has been shot through the heart twice. He doesn't know who did it, but we know that for them, it doesn't matter who did it because they all played a part in it. And then what does Charles do? What do you think he does? He picks up the murder weapon. He holds it. The Spanish policeman gets there. He sees Charles standing there with the gun, and Charles says, I already knew that I was going to take the blame for this. And he does it willingly. So this is a great book because it takes the kind of Agatha Christie whodunit, and it makes all of them part of the crime. And it also turns the very nature of the crimes themselves on their head because the characters want to commit the crimes. They want to take the blame for the others because it's this like secret ritual society in which no one else can be a part. And that's why it's a dystopian fable, because we learn that Charles is an outsider in this whole thing, and so was Frank. But they are now part of something that they ordinarily would never have been a part of. And it's crazy because Charles is a travel writer. He's been all over the world. He's seen all kinds of resorts and people and expats and foreigners and all the places. But this is the only place where he finds this kind of excitement. And it's because, like everybody else in the book, he has no value. He seeks nothing higher than the excitement of his blood running, or crime, or psychosexual excitement or thrills. And there's nothing that exists for these people before this or after this. And in fact, it's so dark that the very people who become the victims are willing victims. They want to be part of the sacrifice. And, it's just kind of like, we've seen so much, especially in the past few years, about the rise of paganism. And one thing that's interesting, like for instance, in the pagan ritual, is the fact that the victims always seem to, not always, but seem to be willing participants in the pseudo-religious ritual, or in the pagan, in the pagan demonic ritual of the group, right? Sacrificing themselves for the group and for this kind of a temporal transcendence. Yeah, DJ says base passions. Base passions to in extremis, right? That's all they have. And that's, I think it's really interesting that, that the book has this veneer of being a travelogue, because it makes it sort of meta, because it's a travelogue from Charles, who is a travel writer, and it's the kind of book you read traveling, but it's much darker than that. It also reminded me a lot of Alex Garland's The Beach, if you've seen that or read the book, because again, it's people wanting to go off the beaten path and escape the normal like path of being the tourist. And these people they've gone way past being tourists. Now they've set up their own like sort of pseudo England on the shores of Spain, and now it transcends countries and boundaries. Now it's their own thing with a law unto itself, right? I also found this interesting because it reminded me of, I've got a book in the other room on the Costa del Sol in Spain, the crime, the crime coast, and this place, I think it still continues to be, but it was a haven for, especially in the 80s and 90s, for all sorts of English drug dealers, English drug traffickers, gun runners, who, if you've ever seen Sexy Beast, right, that's a great film that sort of gets at that. I mean, remember Ben Kingsley and Ray Winstone? I love Ray Winstone. One of my friends, this is so weird, but one of my friends, shouts out to Steph, is best friends with Ray Winstone's daughter. That's a great film because, Ben Kingsley is this English gangster on the Spanish coast in this house overlooking the sea, and he can't outrun his problems because he brings them with him. And then eventually, he is killed and buried under the very swimming pool that is like the symbol at the heart of what he's trying to how he's trying to escape and transcend, right? Of course, the swimming pool also itself is a mirror, right? It's a mirror or a looking glass flashing back the sort of warped reflection of these people and how they want to escape, and yet they remain the same because they are empty. They are empty inside. Just like they have to empty the swimming pool in order to break up the concrete at the bottom to bury Ben Kingsley. And it's the same in this story. So a couple of things, a couple of excerpts in this. First of all, the chapter titles are pretty revelatory. But the first one, Frontiers and Fatalities. The book begins, crossing frontiers is my profession. Those strips of no man's land between the checkpoints always seems such zones of promise, rich with the possibilities of new lives, new scents and affections. At the same time, they set off a reflex of unease that I've never been able to repress. As the customs officials rummage through my suitcases, I sense them trying to unpack my mind and reveal a contraband of forbidden dreams and memories. And even then, there are the special pleasures of being exposed, which may well have made me a professional tourist. I earn my living as a travel writer, but I accept that this is little more than a masquerade. My real luggage is rarely locked, its catches eager to be sprung. Gibraltar was no exception. Though this time there was a real basis for my feelings of guilt, I had arrived on the morning flight from Heathrow, making my first landing on the military runway that served this last outpost of the British Empire. I'd always avoided Gibraltar with its vague air of a provincial England left out too long in the sun, but my reporter's ears and eyes soon took over, and for an hour I explored the narrow streets with their quaint tea rooms, camera shops, and policemen disguised as London bobbies. Gibraltar, like the Costa del Sol, was off my beat. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind here is that I'm sure all of my my English friends out there and all of my Anglo Commonwealth friends know this, and of course everybody here probably knows this. High IQ audience and friends, but a lot of people don't. Is that Gibraltar, the Rock of Gibraltar itself, the Rock, is English, right? It's still an English territory. As it says in the book, the last outpost of the British Empire. It's not quite the last outpost, but it's interesting that I think many Americans probably don't realize this, that the twin pillars there, right? The entryway into the other world of the Mediterranean from the Atlantic, right, where Spain meets Morocco, meets North Africa. At the Rock of Gibraltar, this big rock, this volcanic rock rising out of the ocean, is English. And I know that the English still continue to have problems with the Spanish Air Force because the lines, the aerial lines are so tight that it often the British pilots, especially the British Air the RAF pilots, will veer into the sort of invisible lines in the sky over into Spanish territory, and will have to overcorrect themselves. But it's a hotly debated territory. You remember the scene in The Living Daylights? It's probably one of the best examples, just to the layman, right? The Living Daylights is one of the great examples of where it begins in Spain, but of course it's set at the Rock of Gibraltar on the SAS base. And in fact, in the 80s, there was a real-life example of an attempted terrorist attack by the IRA. They had three people? It was the three Fenians killed on the Rock by the SAS in a swift military activity, trying to blow up an installation on the Rock, one of the British military installations. But remember Timothy Dalton. He skydives into it, right? They're on a training exercise that goes live. Then he's on top of a Land Rover, and then he ends up in the boat with the woman, and he's got like the 80s brick telephone. Great movie. Living Daylights is amazing. I love The Living Daylights. Sidetrack into Bond movies. I think, here's a hot take, you guys. Timothy Dalton is the best Bond. Hot take. Why do I say that? Personal opinion. But why do I say that? Because Timothy Dalton, Welshman playing Bond, is sort of a gray man in the way that the others aren't. He's not. I mean, he's good looking, but he's not like striking looking like like Daniel Craig or Sean Connery, right? He sort of fits in. He's also conflicted. He has more of a emotional fire, I think, than the other Bonds. And there are only two of them. And the Living Daylights is, remember, it ends up being about the opium traffickers and the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, right? And remember the ice cream man? Not the ice cream man, the milkman. Remember the bad milkman? There's that scene where they go to Checkers or whatever, and the milkman comes and he's trying to assassinate him. And then the cook, right, which is kind of a Steven Seagal Under Siege scene, but the cook / butler is the guy who fights him off the hardest. I thought that was pretty badass. And then it's got Joe Don Baker, who then reappeared in Listen, Jimmy. Remember Joe Don Baker? He reappeared in GoldenEye. But then License to Kill is amazing. Robert Davi, Benicio del Toro, right? And they play cocaine traffickers. So both of those movies, they're kind of twin movies going hand in hand. Also, I remember watching that movie in the theater, and it was so cool because there's a scene where Timothy Dalton is water skiing with no skis, and I thought that was so cool when I was 9. Did it come out in 1989? License to Kill. It's also got the best the License to Kill song by Gladys Knight is by far the best Bond song. All right. Fight me for charity if you disagree now. Yes, I'm a Bond nerd, of course. Anyway, back to this. So it's interesting that Gibraltar is this last outpost, kind of like these people are in the last outpost of their depravity. They are seeking a place that's outside but also insular. Gibraltar rises out of the sea, just like I suppose it's probably stretching it, but the British temperament itself rising, with sea power, lording over the rest of the continent. And then, of course, how the residence itself, the residencia and the resorts rise up over the land and sort of dominate. And what's interesting is that he, in a number of times, he describes the resort itself as being on these. It's built on these empty strips of land where nothing else is. So it lacks the kind of hereditary. I don't know, the provenance of an authentic, Spanish town. I've been there, by the way. I've been to the Costa del Sol, and I spent 3 weeks in Spain in 2004, spring of 2004. And, if I'm sure a lot of people here have been to Spain, but Spain to me it was one of the best places I've ever been. I've been all over Europe and everywhere, and Spain is amazing. It's like it almost seemed like undiscovered in a way. Everyone goes to. I know it's not, but the way I went alone and spent 3 weeks there. I met up with one of my homeboys there for about a week, and we went to Sevilla, Barcelona, Madrid, Malaga, Almeria, Salamanca. We went all over the place, and Spain is it's amazing. It's so cool. Because in a lot of ways, you compare it to England, it's almost like a sunny England in terms of its age and a lot of the architecture. But then, the further south you get, it's mixed in with this Moorish architecture. It's just it's amazing. It's really fun. And let's see. Let me get to where he describes the place. The actual place, the resort, is called the Estrella de Mar. And he says, the Costa del Sol is a kind of willed limbo. I climbed a pathway of blue tiles to a grassy knoll. Right right? Big JFK event was, yesterday, 59th anniversary. Grassy knoll, and looked down to an endless terrain of picture windows, patios, and miniature pools. Together they had a curiously calming effect, as if these residential compounds, British, Dutch, and German, were a series of psychological pens that soothed and domesticated these emigre populations. I sensed that the Costa del Sol, like the retirement coast of Florida, the Caribbean, and the Hawaiian Islands, had nothing to do with travel or recreation, but formed a special kind of willed limbo. Although seemingly deserted, the pueblos contained more residents than I had first assumed. A middle-aged couple sat on a balcony 30 feet from me, the woman holding an unread book in her hands as her husband stared at the surface of the swimming pool, whose reflection dressed the walls of a nearby apartment house with bands of gold light. Almost invisible at first glance, people sat on their terraces and patios, glaring at an unseen horizon like figures in the paintings of Edward Hopper. Of course, that's why I used the thumbnail from the Edward Hopper swimming pool paintings, because it represents the kind of blending into the horizon, like as if they are trying to escape and almost disappearing, just like they're almost invisible people. These people seem to seek nothing outside of the surface of the pool, right? Which is itself illusory. There is a depth to it, but these people are there just for base pleasures and there's nothing. I'm not talking about actually vacationing, right? Or pleasure seeking in terms of like going to foreign places and, experiencing the rest of the world. That's not what I'm referring to. I'm talking about the people who go there, these elites who go there, take over, and then build a residence compound that is completely insular, built by a German-Dutch consortium, and then sort of, they feed themselves with ROIP, violence, theft, and drug trafficking, and then eventually ritual murder in order to form a common bond with people that they couldn't form in their ordinary lives because they are beyond the bounds of any kind of sensory experience, and they have no spiritual or religious depth, right? This says, purpose-built in the 1970s by a consortium of Anglo-Dutch developers, Estrella de Mar was a residential retreat for the professional classes of Northern Europe. The other one is Dutch-German. The resort had turned its back on mass tourism, and there were none of the skyscraper blocks that rose from the water's edge at Benalmádena and Torremolinos. The old town by the harbor had been pleasantly bijouized. A bijou is like a small store, almost like a pueblo. The fishermen's cottages converted to wine bars and antique shops. Within the open studio, half a dozen artists worked at their sculpture tables, smocks protecting their beach clothes. A handsome Spanish youth stood with sullen grace on a podium as the sculptors, everyone an amateur, judging by their earnest manner, massaged their clay into a likeness of his thighs and torso. Their burly instructor, a ponytailed Vulcan at his forge, moved among them, tweaking a navel with a stubby forefinger or smoothing a furrowed brow. They're engaged in like the visual arts and sculpture. It's interesting that it's Vulcan at his forge, because that's when I think of Gibraltar itself, I think of this volcano. That's what I think of. I think of a volcano with a Vulcan underneath, right, forging the fires of these people's base passions. It says, Estrella de Mar, I decided, possessed far more attractions than I'd guessed when Frank first arrived to manage the Club Nautico. That's the club that his brother Frank manages, and that Charles then becomes Frank. Right, not literally, but all of the things that he does, he becomes him. He metamorphoses into his brother, and then he is sealed into their ritual group. The monoculture of sun and sangria that becalmed the Pueblo residents had no place in this vibrant little enclave, which seemed to combine the best features of Bel Air and the left bank. Opposite the gates of the Club Nautico was an open-air cinema with an amphitheater carved from the hillside. A placard by the ticket kiosk advertised a season of Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy films, the very height of intellectual chic of a certain kind. I love how he says that. That's almost a Bret Easton Ellis line, right? It's like the height of intellectual chic is the Katharine Hepburn Spencer Tracy film season, and but it's of a certain kind, right? It's almost vague enough that it's hard to define because these people's life is all vagary. Shouts out to everybody here. If you want to smash that like, please support me by smashing that like. Hit the subscribe button if you are new, if you haven't subscribed. Appreciate y'all out there. And if you want to support me, I would really appreciate it. You can hit the super chat link, or this would benefit me way more if you would hit the Venmo, PayPal, or Cash App. Shouts out to our homegirl Kristen out there, working hard all the way through the new year. Thank you so much, Kristen. Thank you for that $5 Cash App. Really appreciate you. I could really use the support. We're grinding down now to the end of the year, to December, and man, help me keep the channel going by dropping me a fat chat there. I really could appreciate it. I really need it. Let's see. On page 66 and 67, these people, they watch an assault take place, a roip, as if it's a folkloric or pagan rite from a more primitive world. They just stand there watching, right? And in fact, we find out that the people who owned the mansion overlooking the resort were this couple of English, probably our child type people who lord it overlooking it, and who they take a cut of all of the various activities that are going on. They own part of the land. They are true elites, and even in the ritual at the end, they are happy to die in the conflagration. They are also doing creepy and nefarious things with their assistants, and then we find out that there is another guy who is one of the inner circle who is literally doing creeper things on the island, which the people sort of make no attempt to stop because they have no boundaries. They have no moral. There is no morality to them, right? It's like Kurt's looking down on their petty morality, their petty lying morality. At one point, one of the motifs in the novel is the idea of seeming versus being, and then the maze and the labyrinth. And we see that the labyrinthine streets of the village echo the sort of M.C. Escher-esque passageways of the residents, and that is supposed to be an outer reflection of the inner minds of these people trying to come to grips with who they are in terms of their new ritual society. This says on page 151, says, hidden perspectives turned Estrella de Mar into a huge riddle. Trompe l'œil corridors beckoned but led nowhere. I could sit all day spinning scenarios that proved Frank innocent, but the threads unraveled the moment they left my fingers. So in other words, like any great mystery or whodunit, right, we're constantly met with false doors in terms of how people answer questions, the amount that they hold back, lies by omission, fake and true motivations, the way that they connect with one another in terms of their familial and their friend lines in society, and that mirrors the way that, like, when you're going through the compound, there are false doors, right? You open the door and it's a brick wall, or we're led on a number of different red herrings says, trying to find the Plaza Iglesias, I turned in and out of the narrow streets and soon lost myself in the maze of alleyways. I stopped in a small square, little more than a public courtyard, where a fountain played beside an open-air cafe. I was tempted to walk to the Club Nautico and pay one of the porters to retrieve the car. A flight of worn stone steps climbed from a corner of the square to the plaza, but in my present mood, I would soon transform it into an Escher staircase. So, we've seen in a number of these different works how the kind of we see the inverted world and the inversion of mores and morality and the typical way of doing things. We see that that relationships are subverted, and they're all willingly doing this because they find excitement in it. They find excitement in lies and in the hidden nature of what they're really up to. They all still live, they still do the things on the surface. They still play tennis, and they swim, and they exercise, and they take their art classes like they're at a normal, resort, like they're at a vacation, they're on vacation. But this is a permanent vacation, and what they really want is a permanent vacation from reality, or a permanent vacation from any kind of accountability. And in a way, they achieve that, right? They achieve that because they are accountable to no one but themselves, and they control society. It talks about on page 199, Bobby Crawford is dangerous. He set fire to your car, and when Charles finds out, see, he's the apprentice. He becomes the apprentice to Bobby Crawford and then takes over the role. And then when Bobby Crawford sacrifices himself in a way by letting himself get killed, Charles lets himself take the blame. And it's not that he just takes the blame. He lets himself take the blame. It says there are silos of cocaine and heroin sitting there. Medicinal quality heroin and cocaine are Crawford's answer to the benzodiazepines we doctors love so much. He once told me that I was putting people under house arrest inside their own heads. For him, heroin and cocaine and all these new amphetamines represent freedom, the right to be a crashed out bar kook like B.B. Jansen. B.B. Jansen is one of the people who lives in this compound. As I watched her through a mirror, I had the sense that we were still inside a film, because we find out that the filmed 8mm, 8mm Nick Cage creeper Roip activity that took place is, of course, you read this and you go, of course, this is a Jeff Stein-Effrey palace, and there are double-sided mirrors, right? And this is all a giant blackmail operation. But it's interesting because just like Jeff Stein-Effrey, a lot of the people let themselves be blackmailed, right? So that they can be part of this group. Page 257 says, the infrastructure, as I knew, belonged to that other and more quickening realm that lay below the surface of the Residencia Costa Sol, a reversed image of the amateur theatricals. Get it? The reversed image, the pool, cordon bleu classes, and neighborhood watch schemes. As we sped towards the perimeter road, I waited for Crawford to signal a halt before setting off to vandalize a parked car or spray paint obscenities on a garage door, because that's his Fight Club society there, right? This is where the bored dilettantes and the playboys go, and they gather with Bobby Crawford, and he sets them off on their missions, right? I am Robert Paulson. And they go and they vandalize and they break in places, they smash windows. And then, of course, like we said at the beginning, that gives the people something to rally around. Oh, we have to protect ourselves from this, or we have to take part in this. But he had moved from this phase of primary spade work to the larger strategic task of laying down his administrative network, his bureaucracy of crime. Interesting that they call it that. It shows that this is where I think this book sort of serves as a metaphor, in a way, for the strategy of tension, right? Limited hangouts, controlled opposition, and synthetic terror that we've seen so much in the globalist books, because we have a group of elites They go to this place, this colonial outpost. They make it their own. They're insular. No one can control them. And all of the crime and the criminal activity is bureaucratic because it is, even though they're trying to break the surface of something superficial, right? Even their crime tends to be superficial. They're looking for deeper meaning in the bonds of crime, but even that ends up being not enough, which is why they end up killing the people. They kill 5 people in this sort of pentagram wicker man ritual burning on a hill overlooking the thing, and they all stand around, admiring the flames with these people dying inside, and they do nothing, right? They just think it's just par for the course. It's part of it's just what they have to do. And when it becomes their time, then they'll take part in it. In time-honored fashion, the 3 pillars of his regime were drugs, gambling, and illicit sex. So do you see how this is also supposed to be a metaphor for crime that takes place on a grander scale outside of the residence in the kind of planned communities of regular society, right? This is like Frank Kitson and his 1962 low-intensity operations, right? This is like, co-opting the Mau Mau's or co-opting the street gangs in the war in Malaya, right? Or any kind of fake flossy flag operations, right? Or the color revolutions, right? Synthetic terror, organized from above, strategy of tension. Jay was just talking about this last night in terms of Condor operations and Gladio, right? It's like when there is no enemy to be found, the enemy is created from within, and so we have capitalism and communism as two sides of the same sort of globalist coin, right? There's a flip side to that coin. What are you, a monk? Our house calls revealed, and he had soon recruited the team of dealers. Nigel Kendall, a retired Hammersmith vet, an unblinking man in his early 40s with a silent wife perpetually dazed by Paula Hamilton's tranquilizers. She's the psychiatrist for the residents. And she's also the person who filmed the Eyes Wide Shut ceremony. Carol Morton, a predatory hairdresser from Rochdale who ran the refurbished beauty salon at the shopping mall. Susan Henry and Anthea Rose, 2 widows in their 30s who had already set up a small agency direct selling exotic underwear and perfumery around the complex. Ronald Machen, a one-time police inspector who had resigned from the Met after bribery allegations. Paul and Simon Winchell, both in their late teens, sons of one of the more prominent residencia families who supplied the youth trade. They're pimps. Right, they're pimps in the creeper activities, the Jeff Stein Effrey creeper activities at the residence. Under the guise of delivering the latest property brochures, Crawford slipped his manila envelopes through their letterboxes. Opening his sales rep's suitcases while he was ringing Mashin's doorbell, I found a stack of information wallets emblazoned with the Residencia Costa Sol for investment opportunities and peace of mind. Each a compact pharmaceuticals kit packed with cocaine, heroin, amphetamines, amyl nitrate, and barbiturates. So, let's see. The page 260 goes into the talks about the outpost of the next century, and this is why the book is interesting as a kind of, this and the Ellis book are kind of interesting as pre-Big Nine event explorations of the way that the world will be post-Big Nine, post-War on Terror, right? This functions as the outpost of the next century. It says, nothing. I shouldn't really be here. It's difficult to see what lies in store. Nothing. You've seen it all at Estrella de Mar and now the Residencia. You haven't grasped it yet, but you're sitting in an outpost of the next century. Massage parlors, gambling, and 10,000 lines of cocaine. It sounds rather old-fashioned. All you need next is rampant inflation and deficit financing. Charles, Crawford took my hands from the steering wheel as if even the stationary car was too much for my confused view of the road ahead. A real community has created itself here. It rose spontaneously out of people's lives. Then why the drugs and burglaries and whoring? Why not step back and let everyone get on with it? I wish I could. Almost despairingly, Crawford stared at the villas that surrounded us in the residential avenue. Of course, we know it didn't pop up. Right. It didn't pop up organically. Without that, the whole thing runs down. Only crime or something close to crime seems to stir them. They realize that they need each other, that together they're more than the sum of their parts. There has to be that constant personal threat. Like Londoners in the Blitz, wartime camaraderie. Exactly. After all, war is a kind of crime. There's nothing like finding someone else's shit in your swimming pool. Before you know it, you've joined the neighborhood watch scheme and taken your old violin out of its case. Your wife starts effing you with real pleasure for the first time in years. It works, Charles, but it's a fierce recipe. Isn't there any other way? You could preach to them, become the Savonarola of the Costa del Sol. I've tried it. Crawford gazed glumly at himself in the rearview mirror. Crime as a respectable history. Shakespeare's London, Medici Florence, warrens of murder, poisons, and garroting. Name me a time when civic pride and the arts both flourished and there wasn't an extensive crime. And then on page 267, we get really this. We get this aspect of the whole complex that is more pseudo-mystical than the rest of the book lets on, because we realize that this is not only the outpost of the future, but it's actually a Neo-Eden, right? With Crawford or the Hollingers, they were the people that they're kind of the R-childs that own the complex, as the kind of demiurge for this sort of Gnostic Neo-Eden. It says, his Garden of Eden, we're talking about this guy Sanger. Sanger is a creeper who, he's one of the elites at the residence, and he's also a creeper. Sang is in blood, right? Bloodlines. Sanger, or Margaret Sanger, his Garden of Eden. Crawford bit the grimy vein with his teeth. He can play God, Adam, and the serpent without having to change his fig leaf. One of the bungalows is the office where he sees his patients. The other he lets to a French woman and her daughter, the girl in the pool. The third he shares with his latest protege. Look under the umbrella. Her toneless cheeks reminded me of the heroin addicts I'd seen in the prison hospital in Canton, unconcerned by the death penalties they faced because they had already taken their seats in the tumbrel. Her true home was the druggy squat in the pus-stained mattress, a realm of shared needles and absent hopes where moral judgments were never made. Yeah, it's a sinner's paradise. Exactly, Jason. And then finally, the reason for the crime is spelled out on page 317. A great crime was needed, something terrible and spectacular that would bind everyone together, seal them into a sense of guilt that would keep Estrella de Mar going forever. It wasn't enough to remember Bobby Crawford and all the minor crimes he committed, the burglaries and drugs and sex films. The people of Estrella de Mar had to commit a major crime themselves, something violent and dramatic, up on a hill where everyone could see it, so we'd all feel guilty forever. And then the last line of the book is, did he already know as he walked towards me that I would take responsibility for the death? Crawford's mission would endure, and the festivals of the Residencia Costa Sol would continue to fill the sky with their petals and balloons as the syndicates of guilt sustained their dreams. There's a lot I didn't get into in this book, especially the idea of the bacchanal. I mean, that's what this is, right? And it's a kind of bacchanal where they're taking part in the kind of Freudian ritual slaying of the, in this sense, of the shaman. Right. And I didn't really get into that, or the kind of, the sort of ritual aspects of, sun worship that they get into in this, which we would see as kind of, as essentially they are. I mean, these people are Luciferians, right? They're trying to transcend through ritual murder and sacrifice and bind themselves in their sin and guilt. But I would say, it's a good book, and I'm interested in reading some more Ballard books. I was thinking of reading The Concrete Island. I'll probably skip High Rise, and of course, I didn't mention this, but probably later on today, if no one else is streaming, I'm going to do another stream because we had a sponsor stream by our homeboy Nico out there, who asked me to analyze the film Angel Heart and also Strange Days, and I can't get a copy of Strange Days. I just can't find it anywhere to rewatch it. I've seen it a number of times. Catherine Bigelow, Ray Fiennes. But I'll probably be doing Angel Heart, which is a great, speaking of a kind of a detective story, which is Mickey Rourke. So I'll probably be doing that later on today if anybody's interested. That was a sponsor stream. And if you want to sponsor a stream, please don't hesitate to drop me a fat chat. Those were films. So he dropped me $50, so I said I would do those. Of course, there is a book for Angel Heart, but it costs as much to get the book, and it'll take as long. It costs as much as he dropped for the chat. I mean, the book is really expensive, and it'll take a couple weeks to get here. So I just went ahead and watched the movie, and then we'll do that. If you want to drop them to me through PayPal or one of the other things so I can get it so that I don't have to wait, because there's a whole thing with Super Chats. So whatever, I won't get into that. Next, I'm just going to briefly cover some of The Informers by Bret Easton Ellis. And I said I was going to do this a while back, and then I read it, and then I put it off, and I said I'm never going to do this book. And then, but I decided just after this book to just cover one of the short stories in the book because, we cover a lot of pretty heavy material here. But I got to say, even with my ability to cover, I guess a lot of heavy material is in terms of like dark material, there still comes a time when, something can be too much. And I'll just say that, American Psycho is a heavy book, but it was fair. It's not, I don't want to say it was a breeze for us to cover, but we can find a lot of lighter moments in terms of how we analyze and criticize the book, right? But this book is a lot different because I didn't see, it's called The Informers, and I got to say that I didn't see a whole lot of lightness in this book. I mean, it's really dark. There's one short story in this book that like really affected me. It like really disturbed me. It really, honestly, just sharing this with you, like, I don't even want to say what happens in the short story, but it was so dark, it really depressed me. It really honestly got to me. So I, of course, am not going to be covering that one because it was too much. I just found it so disgusting, just so too much. It was just too much. And so I'm not going to be doing that one. But I am going to cover briefly what the book is a series of vignettes basically about, disaffected, jaded, lonely, elite people in various they do various things like in the 80s and 90s. There's a rock star who does pretty awful things. There's a producer who takes his son to Hawaii. There's a wife of a guy. And then there's this other story that I'm not going to get into. But one of them that I found the most interesting, which I can cover a little bit, is about a vampire named Jamie in L.A. And there are hints of this throughout the book. For instance, there's one part where these people are getting out of a club, and they say, they discovered one of their friends, and he'd been killed by a vampire. They're aware of a vampire in L.A., and he'd been slaughtered. And then we actually get to that story in chapter 10 of this book, and it's called The Secrets of Summer. And essentially, it's about a vampire in L.A. And I thought it was interesting because I'd always one thing that I found interesting was I'd always wondered why we kind of covered this in our Dracula stream and a couple other streams, but why, the vampire, David Patrick Harry also covered this in one of his vampire streams, that, the vampire essentially serves as the inversion of Christianity, right? It's a guy who is bound to Satan, who is engaged in the ritual sacrifice of human beings through the lifeblood, right? By being a predator on other humans, and it kind of ties into a lot of the Arduino aspects. But I'd always wondered why there weren't many stories. We talked about it in the Hunger analysis. We did an analysis of the Hunger, that movie, with David Bowie, right? And how there's never a vampire who's a heroin addict. Well, there is in this, and his name is Jamie. And what he is he's essentially just a Hollywood vampire, but he's an actual vampire. And I can't really cover a lot of it, and there's not really much point to the story other than to say that a lot of the imagery really gets at the vampire in a more visceral way than the romanticized vampire that we get in other stories. And it says, for instance, on page 177, it says, let's see, he brings back a girl to his apartment that he met like at the club. She doesn't want to do this, and she knows she's way out of her league, and she knows it's too late. And this, I can't say that part. She says, "Where's the Coke? Where's the Coke?" She doesn't really want to. Something's, man, I can't really read this, you guys. It's so bad. But he says, I start something her, and I look into her face, and like always, she freaks out when she sees my eyes, shiny black, and she sees the horrible teeth and the ruptured mouth. And I'm screaming on top of her. And she starts screaming, and he does something. I can't even read this. Oh, my God. I mean, gosh, I'm sorry, you guys. I really planned on doing this, but I can't. I don't know if I can even read this short story. At one point, he starts sucking her blood, and then he starts going hazy, and he realizes it's because she's a heroin addict, and her blood is filled with drugs, and so he starts going into a haze. He rolls off the bed onto the floor, my head killing me, this poison cramping my stomach up, and I crawl out toward the bathroom. And he's with this actress in L.A. She says, let's play again. He growls at her, trying to scare her, showing off his teeth, the fangs, the horrible transformed mouth, his black eyes lidless. But she doesn't freak out. She just laughs completely high. I really can't read this. I will say that at the end of the short story, he goes and he meets with Jamie has a psychiatrist, and he goes to the psychiatrist asking him for Darvocet. They don't make Darvocet anymore. It was it's like Percocet. It's like a narcotic painkiller. I don't think they make it anymore because it did something to people's hearts. But he's asking him for it, and the doctor won't give it to him. Now, the doctor knows that Jamie is a vampire, but he's his only confidant. He says, "Have you killed anyone else recently, Jamie?" Dr. Nova asks, not too visibly shaken. In a movie, I say, in my mind. So that's interesting because he plays reality like a movie in his mind. And that's pretty meta because he's in Hollywood and he feeds on Hollywood people. And it also shows you this sense of dissociation, right? Dr. Nova sighs, studies me, largely unassured. What do you want? I want to be in the backseat of your car. I hear you, Jamie. I want my Darvocet refilled, or else I'm going to be waiting beneath that lovely black-bottom pool of yours one night while you're out for a little midnight swim, Dr. Nova, and I'll pull veins and tendons out of your well-muscled thigh. I'm standing now, pacing. I'll give you the Darvocet, Jamie, but I want you here on a less irregular basis. I'm totally psyched, I say. You're as cool as they come. Notice how he's waiting for him at the bottom of his pool, just like in the last story, right? He fills out a prescription, and then while handing it to me, he says, "Why should I fear you? Because I'm tan and my teeth are so sharp they make a straight razor seem like a butcher knife. Need a better reason? Why do you threaten me? Why should I fear you? Because I'm going to be the last image you ever see." I tell him, "Count on it." "Where's the place you feel safest?" I ask. "In an empty movie theater," Dr. Nova says. Notice the movies again. What's your favorite movie, I ask? Vacation with Chevy Chase and Christie Brinkley. What's your favorite cereal? Frosted Mini Wheats or something with bran in it. What's your favorite TV commercial for? Bayer Aspirin. Who did you vote for in the last election? Reagan. Define the vanishing point. You, he's crying, define it. We've already been there, I tell him. We've already seen it. Who? We, he chokes. Legion. And at one point, the vampire is a demon, right? And at one point he says he dreams about the 80s, nuclear conflagration, because he wants to see the world burn, because everyone will die, and then he will still be there with his fellow vampire demons scouring the earth for the last victims. This is like the ultimate bleak vision, right? And it's interesting that the vampire meets with other vampires, and like with other vampire, stories, like he's, ages old and he's always existed, but he also wishes for one of the things that I think a lot of times they don't get at in vampire stories is that his ultimate goal is the destruction of the world, right? To see the final destruction of the world, which is, we've seen this so much in postmodern literature, right? We saw this in Blood Meridian. We saw it in The Passenger. We've seen it in Cormac McCarthy. We've seen it in Bret Easton Ellis. And we especially saw it in American Psycho, where Patrick Bateman's vision of the world is blood dripping from the clouds and the kind of volcanic explosion to annihilate the earth, because that's what they see in themselves. That's all they have in themselves, is the need to destroy. So I'm sorry that I'm not really going to cover the rest of this book, but I think that if I find it too hard to cover, I think that I definitely think that people listening would find it too hard to cover and to listen to. And like I said at the beginning, maybe you're on a Thanksgiving trip and you're driving out to Pawpaw's, and you just wanted to listen to some light literary criticism. That's not really what we do, but because of that, I really can't get into the rest of the book. Not to mention the fact that the algo would be destroyed with some of the language in the book. And so, if you want to check it out, you can. This is Bret Easton Ellis's Informers. Maybe I'll try and make it more palatable for another time. But like I said, this is, I think, maybe the only example of a book that I set out to cover for us, and I just can't. I just don't want to do it. It's just too much. So that being said, what do you guys think? What do you think about this? I'm going to take a break, certainly from the postmodern literature for a while, and I think that would probably be the best thing to do for us. I'm certainly going to be going into more Shakespeare. I'll be covering some of the history plays by Shakespeare, probably the Henriade plays, Henry IV. We've covered Henry V. I'll be talking about Henry VI and Falstaff. If you've got any ideas for things you want me to cover, please go ahead and drop that. And of course, in the comments afterwards. I don't think we have any other super chats. So let me make sure real quick. Let me see if we got any super chats. Oh yeah, we did. We got, let's see, our homeboy Devin out there, our almond bro, dropped $10. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Says, great stream and happy Thanksgiving, Kang. Hey, happy Thanksgiving to you. Really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Alan, our homeboy Alan out there, drops $5 on PayPal. Really appreciate that. And our homegirl Kristen dropped $5 on Cash App. So thank you so much for supporting me. Yeah, don't forget to like and share the stream. Help me continue to build the channel. And I will be covering Bret Easton Ellis in January when his new book comes out, The Shards. I also may be covering his book Glamorama, not anytime soon, but in the future, his book Glamorama, which I've talked about before. And let's see, what else? I think that's about it. I may be back later on this afternoon just to do a short stream analyzing the film Angel Heart with Mickey Rourke. It's a really great, I mean, I really like the film. It's pretty clever. We discussed it a little bit when we talked about the Faustian bargain, because it's about the Faustian bargain, the character selling his soul, and so we'll be getting into that. Let's see. Jason says, Cocaine Nights had me thinking about the controversial article Alex Gray wrote in the 60s about leisure, elites, horrific crimes that enable their leisure and isolation, parasitic nature, vampires, etc. Excellent. And Justin says, I request House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. I'm sure you've heard of it. That, along with the Whalestow Letters, which expands upon something. Many other requests too. Awesome. Yes, drop those in the comments afterwards so I can go back to them right afterwards and see, and I can note them down. Really appreciate that. Thank you. Yes, Jethro says Louis. Yes, my name is Louis Cypher. I like how Mickey Rourke keeps calling him, listen, Mr. Cypher. And it's a Cypher. It's a really great film. But it took me a long time to get the meaning of Angel Heart, honestly. But it's worth us covering here. So that's about all I got, y'all. Thank you so much. And again, please leave your comments afterwards, after the chat. Drop me some things that you want me to cover. Books, films, I'll put them on the list. If you want me to cover something specific, drop me a fat super chat and I'll cover that. Thanks to all my homeboys out there. Thanks to all my homies. I hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving Eve, especially everybody who's not here in America. I celebrate Thanksgiving with you. Let's all give thanks. So thank y'all very much. I love y'all. It's about all I got. All right, y'all. I may see you later this afternoon.